I want to talk to you a little bit about what humans fear the most. And I think every human has a different fear. But I think that whatever the fear is, it always leads to the same conclusion, therefore, the same fear. And I think it's a two-part fear. I think we're afraid of death, but not because we're going to die. I think that's part of it. But I think we're afraid of death because at the end of the day, we don't know what happens afterwards. What comes after your body expires? Do you cease to be? Or do you become something greater? Do Christians have it right? Do Muslims? You see, it's one of the unanswerable questions that humanity is faced with. What comes after when you die? What happens? I think that fear comes from the fact that we don't even know who we are. And human beings are very fickle things. We're creatures of ego. We're creatures of vanity. I think, and this is only my opinion, never take what anyone says when they're taking a stance on something as gospel. Take it as an opinion, as such. Form your own. I'm merely asking you to enjoy mine. My personal philosophy, has changed so much over the years. I didn't even call it a philosophy back then. I just called it a way of thinking, a way of believing, having faith. I think that when we die, whatever comes next comes next. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of death, and I'm not afraid of what comes after, because I know that no matter what happens, it won't be this version of me that experiences it. You see, this idea of self that we have tricked ourselves, that we have been told our entire lives who we are. And people are so confused by who they are and what they want and what they fear that it's no wonder that humanity as a whole is just terrified. Because on the one hand, you have atheists who have a secret fear. And I believe this. All atheists have a secret fear that Christians are right. That there is some celestial king who pushed everything into motion, who has watched us from day one to day end and has made a naughty and nice list about all of our deeds and all of our accomplishments, and that when we die, we're going to stand before this creator and he is going to judge us. And then on the other hand, I think Christians are afraid that they're wrong. I've heard people tell me many times that they know for certain that when they die, they're going to heaven. And I stopped arguing and disagreeing with these people, because when you have that much blind faith in anything, you have no room for reason. You have no room for criticizing your own belief. But the truth is that nobody actually knows. It's a guess. So the philosophy of death persists. What do you think happens when we die? Does anything happen? Well, if nothing happens, if you die and that's just it, well, you won't be around to be disappointed. You won't exist anymore. If nothing happens, you won't care. You see, these troubles are only for the living. There's a famous saying that only the dead have seen the end of war. And that obviously applies to war, but it applies to anything else. Only the dead have seen the end of questioning. Only the dead have seen the end of guessing. Only the dead have seen the end of suffering. At least in terms of this physical realm. See, here's something that people don't understand, is that we can only sense so many different things in this body. Reality, at least in the everyday person's mind, in the practical terms, reality is what we can hear. Reality is what we can see. Reality is what we can taste. Reality is what we can touch. And reality is what we can smell. Those are the five senses. If we come across something that does not fit into any of those five senses, then it is not considered a part of our reality. It is considered hypothesis. It is considered theory. It is considered speculation. But you must know that there are far more dimensions than just the ones that we can perceive. There's a big misconception that time is the fourth dimension. And that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, it doesn't work that way. A lot of people are very confused about how dimensions work. You see, you and me exist in a 3D world. But we can only perceive things in 2D. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take for an example a square. Now, a square is a two-dimensional object. A three-dimensional object, taken again with a square, it becomes a cube. But the reason why you can only perceive things in 2D is because you cannot observe all sides of a square at once, even if it's see-through. Your brain can't process it. You can only see so many sides at once, but you can't see every side at once. Same thing with a circle. A circle is a two-dimensional object, but a three-dimensional version of a circle is a sphere, and you can't see the back side of a sphere. You can't see the bottom, and you can't see every side at once. Now, if you existed in the fourth dimension, you could perceive things in the third dimension. That means you would be able to see everything at once. And see, we can't do that. And scientists, as far as my knowledge serves me, has determined several layers of dimensions. They can prove 11, I believe, 10 or 11. Don't quote me on that, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Because the whole point of it is that there's more than just what you can experience. And energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transferred. You are energy. You're pure energy. Think about your body. I want you to grab your hand, and I want you to take your finger of your opposite hand and try to push it through your hand. Now, you can't do it. It's because the vibration of your finger and the vibration of your hand are vibrating at the exact same frequency. Your body is nothing more than immense energy, concentrated in a finite space. A rock, a table, trees, the same thing. It's just immense energy, concentrated in a very finite space. I'll give you a better example of this. Take a ceiling fan that has 3 or 4 or 5 prongs. Now, when it's not turned on, you can put your hand through each of those slides, but the moment it starts turning, starts spinning, starts rotating, try throwing an egg through that. You'll find that it won't go through it because it's moving so fast that it creates a solid object. And in the same way is your body, the same way is the way that you interact with this world. That's why you can't run through a brick wall. It's vibrating faster than you are. So what happens to that energy? Well, no one knows. And here's the other thing about death. Death absolutely starts and begins in your mind. Because we have this tiny little thing called conscious attention. And that's where the ego is. And the ego creates this idea of self. And this idea of self, in turn, creates fears and doubts and worries and anxiety and depression and love and kindness and charity. Your vices and your virtues. Everything that you can think about who you are and how to describe yourself comes from this tiny part of your brain. Now, when you die, that brain shuts off. Yet you are more than a brain. Do you have a body, or are you a body? It's another question. So the philosophy of death can't be answered. But here's the secret. It doesn't need to be. Because you don't need to be afraid of it. You're afraid of it because that is the ultimate form of giving up control. That is the ultimate endgame to the saga that is you. And you don't even know what that is. You have an idea. You have other ideas that other people have told you. The question of death will always plague mankind. And until the day that Jesus comes back in the sky, or till the day that UFOs come in the sky and say, hey, we created you, we made you a science experiment. Or until we all just suddenly wake up one day and realize that we're creating this existence. We are the universe, manifesting it into this experience, this tiny little sliver of the whole of what it means to be a part of everything. It's unanswerable. If you go up in a classroom on a giant whiteboard and there's a math problem that has no answer, are you going to spend your entire lifetime trying to figure it out? Or do you say, well, if that's unsolvable, well, why don't I just leave this classroom and go surfing and go do this and go do that? I think some of our biggest regrets in life is that we don't do enough. We work too much and we don't play enough. We focus more on being bitter instead of being better. We hold grudges instead of holding space. But it's just my opinion. I'm a simple philosopher. I don't have the answers. And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that nobody does. Your guess is as good as mine. So instead of worrying about dying, worry about living. It's not about what you leave behind. It's not about who you leave behind. Just that you experienced this crazy thing that we call life. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.